Oh shit, hurry up, time to go. Alrighty. Sorry for coughing into the microphone. Good morning, everybody. How you doing? My name is Louis Vuitton, and thank you for stopping by. Let me catch up and get the stream up on my phone. Oh, far out. It is cold this morning. I wish some of this cold could have been sent over to the Pacific Northwest, so that would have been nice. Oh shit, shut up. Is that really what I sound like? Anyway, so good morning. As I've said, my name is Louis Vuitton. Welcome, everyone. Now, given that it is the 4th of July, I'm sure that you've noticed it's technically the 5th where I am, because as you may have already noticed, I'm not an American. So, normally what I do when I open up a stream is how's that angle? Ah, there we go. That's a bit better. Anyway, when I open up a stream, I will always acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm on. Now, I do this because it's called an acknowledgement of country, where you acknowledge the land which you're standing on in Australia, as in which indigenous nation it is, whose land that historically you're standing on, well, and contemporarily. You also, when you do an acknowledgement, will usually acknowledge the elders of the nation which you're on, and acknowledge the presence, welcome in any Indigenous or First Nations people who may be joining you. Now, an acknowledgement of country can be done in just about any community event, or any in any community event, in any like professional get together, any kind of setting like that. So, for instance, opening up a community fair, when whoever the mayor, whoever the town, the council member, opens up, they should do an acknowledgement of country. I also mentioned professional settings. So, for instance, a team meeting at your work, that would be an appropriate time to do an acknowledgement of country. A school assembly, that kind of thing. I open my streams with an acknowledgement of country because this is a public setting. This is a public gathering of people coming together, a communal event. It makes an internet stream sound a bit like a little bit pompous, but it's appropriate, and I think it's important because first of all, acknowledgement of countries don't get done enough, and it's important to remember the continued history of the indigenous people from where you're standing. So for me, I'm over in Melbourne suburbs, so I'm on the Wurundjeri land. So I'd like to open up the stream by paying my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging, and welcome any Indigenous people joining us today. Now, as it is the 4th of July, I would hope that the citizens of the United States are taking the time, at least maybe, well, I'd hope that at some part of their day, their thoughts are with the Indigenous population of their country. As someone from the outside looking in, I very rarely see leftists online talking about Indigenous rights and Indigenous reconciliation. I do see some Canadian leftists talking about Indigenous Canadians, but very rarely do I see Indigenous Americans being brought up in conversation. I looked up earlier a list of federally recognized Indigenous tribes, and there was too many to go through on stream. There was easily a couple hundred. So, while I cannot, it would take too long to go through the name of each Indigenous tribe in America. I'd still like to extend the same acknowledgement of country to the Indigenous Americans. and recognize that every American citizen who is standing on American soil right now is standing on indigenous land, and that you know they just need to be aware of that, aware and respectful. The idea behind an acknowledgement of country is that, as somebody who's non-indigenous, myself, non-indigenous American, non-indigenous Australian, it's just about showing respect for the land that you're standing on and the people whose land that is, because, as the phrase goes, always was, always will be Aboriginal land, and the same thing for America. Whether you like it or not, always was, always will be. So, that wasn't the nationalism I wanted to talk about, but I'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, keep that in mind. If you can, wherever you are from in America. So yeah, anyway, what's been going on? I did a crazy stream the other night. Not last night, but the night before. I finished work late. And I was driving home, and I was thinking, fuck, I really don't want to get up early tomorrow and stream. And I had the idea, a crazy idea, so crazy it might just work, that rather than going to bed at like 12:30 or probably even later by the time I got home, and getting up at like 6 a.m. to stream at 7, why don't I stream tonight? And just like stream until like 2 a.m. or something. I was thinking like, oh man, like either way, like I'm going to be sore tomorrow. But I thought, well, hang on, like there's nobody else streaming at this time. Like I had a look on Twitch. The only person that's streaming at that time is Denims. Because Denims gets up really early. I think she starts streaming at like 9 a.m. EST. So I was like, well, she'd be the only one I'd have to compete with. Like, so often, like right now, I'm competing with Hassan, so so often when I stream, I'm competing against several big streamers. Usually I'm competing against Hassan or Hassan, Fosh, Destiny, So I thought, okay, well, here's an opportunity to stream. I think Chud Logic might have been streaming later, but at least when I first started, Denims was the only one. So I did it. I ended up streaming for like 3.5 hours, going until 4:20. That's right, we went to 4:20 because, we had to go to 4:20. Although, fuck staying up until 4:20 in the morning just to smoke some weed. Like, I don't know how potheads do it. But we had a great time. There was quite a few people coming in. It was a really good stream. Covered some great topics. There's people from all over. There was this one person who I've seen hanging around Demon Mama's chat. There's this one guy who was telling us about Sweden. Apparently Sweden's actually swinging far right, well not far right, but Sweden's swinging to the right as well. So the Scandinavian countries aren't really the social democracy paradise. So really Sweden's not that it once was. They were telling us about how Sweden had cut its disability pension for, its differently abled citizens who rely on a disability pension because they don't have the same capacity to work. So that's cool. Apparently, it had been done because of the number of immigrants coming in. And it just seems like a recipe for disaster in terms of helping to give power to far-right nationalism. Like, where are we going to get the money from to help support this new wave of immigrants? I don't know, we'll get it from the disability pension. Oh, that's not going to piss people off. Like, should we tax some big businesses or tax the rich? No, let's cut the disability pension. Oh, fuck me. apparently there's some other thing the person was talking about. They were saying something about I think it was to do with voter turnout. People are, I think, are becoming less motivated to turn up to vote. And apparently there's increasing problems with gang violence in Sweden. Oh, not great. So it's not the social democracy that it once was. Hopefully they can kind of pull out of this nosedive because, so many leftists reference the Scandinavian countries as social democracy in action, social democracy working. But yeah, that's not great to hear that kind of stuff. And we had to talk about climate change a bit as well. There was a couple of doomers. So we had a good time talking about, the the fire in the Gulf of Mexico, which, is still burning now. Looked at this rather tone-deaf Volvo ad, which shows an iceberg collapsing, and the caption's something like, climate change is the ultimate safety test. That's why we're switching to all-electric, starting today. So, well done, everyone. Well done. Can we just give, a little bit of a golf clap for Volvo? The fact that they are switching to energy, starting today. As I said the other night, they're not all energy. They are switching to all energy, starting today. Not 50 years ago, not 20, not even 10. Today. Thank you, Volvo. Thank you so much. We're at the point now where the PR of companies like that contribute to climate change, like automobile companies, realize that it's finally feasible to go electric because public opinion on climate change is so much that now's the time. Even though you make less money, it's still more profitable than continuing with cars powered by fossil fuels. So that's how you know that despite Volvo's best efforts, it is too little, too late. And there's one other thing about that. I had a thought that's flitted out of my head. Oh yeah, it just contributes to the whole idea that the public has just been gaslit on climate change for years. We've been saying for years that this is a world-ending phenomena, and that something needs to be done. And for years, the government, corporations have just gaslit us. And Volvo's response in this ad, climate change is the ultimate safety net. We're switching to all electric starting today. That's just contributes to this idea that now, when the second hand is, rapidly approaching midnight, now they're switching to green power instead. Oh, I wonder how many of their factories will be powered by green energy. Sure, you're producing electric cars, but how many of those factories are powered by green energy? I wonder. Probably not that many. Well, that's unfair. I don't know. I don't know nothing about Volvo's production, but I do know businesses and I know money, so I'd hazard a guess. Good coffee. What else happened? Oh, we had a tankie come in, and that was a lot of fun. They came in, and it's funny because I say that like there's no like all tankies are underage. There's no adult tankies. Um, I mean, like you know that they're underage because they hold such immature beliefs. And there's tankies in the chat screaming that he's not underage, and he was doing a very poor job about it because he was typing all caps, calling me a libtard, and um, at one point he said that, well, actually it was pretty funny because he tried to say that my mother should have aborted me. However, you know, he's underage, so his grasp of the English language isn't as good as an adult's. He instead ended up saying that my mother shouldn't have aborted me. And I lost at that point. The fact that he'd used the negative instead, saying that she shouldn't have aborted me. So I was like, thanks. I'm glad you think so. So it was a lot of fun. I would have, I don't know, I was going to just ban them initially, but it ended up being just a whole lot more fun to tease them. Bloody tankies. But yeah, there was a good mix overall. Didn't have anyone crazy. I didn't actually have to ban anyone. I swear, like, on average, I have to ban one Nazi per stream. Like, every stream, at least one person will come in, on average, and they'll come in and they'll say something about nationalism, or they'll say something about showers, and they'll have to go. But actually, the other night, I actually didn't have anybody come in and drop anything like that. It was a very nice change. It was a very nice change of pace to actually be able to have a stream and not have to ban anyone for some crazy far-right shit. What a nice change. Ugh. So, maybe at this point I should probably actually plug the stream. So, you know, obviously you're here right now on my Twitch. I'm Louis Vuitton. Thank you for stopping by. I also do prepared content over on YouTube, which we'll be taking a look at in a moment, that relates to the consent side of this stream. So, why should you follow me? Well, I'm an Australian lefty producer. It is 7:37 in the morning over here. I get up at 6 a.m. to stream for the Americans because, hey, despite being a leftist, you know, what's the first rule of business? Go where the money is. And the money is in the Americas. The vast majority of Twitch politics, or online politics, online streaming politics, is in America. So I'm not an idiot. Like, you know, I know where the audience is, and it's not in Australia. But I do also stream for Australians in the evening of my time. I don't sometimes, almost half the time, because that stream takes less priority. Because, you know, if I'm going to stream on a day, then I want to stream for the Americans. So I try and stream every day. Kind of content we talk about, stuff to do with workers' rights, minority rights, in particular trans and indigenous rights, and also masculinity. I like to talk about masculinity, see if we can't work out a healthy, non-toxic version of masculinity. Let's talk about what's good, what's not so good, and see if we can't take the best bits and build a new, healthy masculinity in the 21st century. That's what I'm all about. And I have a video coming out very soon. Well, I still need to... Oh, I just noticed Hassan's not live anymore. Hell yeah. Don't have to compete with him. Unless his stream just went down and he's starting it again, in which case... Fuck, what was I going to say? Yeah, the new video, alright. Like the video I just dropped last night, which we'll take a look at in a moment. It's very short, only 1 minute and 37 seconds long, which is the whole idea. Which means I need to plug these in. Oh, okay. And there's also 2 videos coming out. I've started to write the script for one of them. One of them is going to be about Amazon. It's history of anti-unionism. And the other one's going to be about masculinity, but no spoilers regarding to what else it's about. They're both going to be a lot of fun. I'm very happy with how the one from last night turned out. So, maybe we should take a look. Let me plug these in. So, from Louis Vuitton. That's me. Huh. Consent in 60 seconds. Shoot, go away. Now, the whole idea behind this was I saw conversations happening around consent. And for me, at least, the idea of consent is very simple. You know, it's like very basic. We don't need to. I feel like people overcomplicate the conversation. We don't need to add all these, like, look, just very simply, treat people well, which I cover in this video. And so, frustrated as I was with the overcomplication of the conversation around consent, I set out to prove that the idea of consent is so simple that it can be grasped in a literal minute. So, let's take a look, and I'll show you. Consent in 60 seconds. What's the volume like? Alright, let's find out. Let's learn. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the hottest, dirtiest, sexiest thing around. Consent. True. Unlike the Australian government, I'm not going to insult your intelligence with an ad that compares consent to milkshakes. No, I want to show you that the concept is so simple that it can be explained in 60 seconds. Starting now. Consent is all about making sure that everyone involved is comfortable and having a good time. Understand that while you may be comfortable with one thing, someone else may not. Don't think of consent as something to be achieved. Consent is negotiated. How do we talk consent? Well, the most important thing is to be receptive. How are they acting? Do they seem happy? Do they seem enthusiastic? Are they returning your touch in a good way? Are they making a noise in a bad way? If you're ever unsure, just ask. You okay? People are complicated, so socializing can be tricky. If you're not so good on picking up on social cues, then don't escalate further than they have. If they've touched your arm, touch their arm. If they've touched your leg, touch their leg. But if they've only touched your arm, do not touch their leg. And if all else fails, be honest. Would you like to come back to my place and play some video? And nothing else. It's better to come off as awkward than a creep. Clothing is not consent, flirting is not consent, no means no, no that changes to yes is still no, and a coerced yes is definitely a no. Because if it's not a hell yeah, it's a hell no. Wow, well, pretty far I must say. I gotta say. Let's see, let me bring up the script so I can run through it properly. So yeah, I'm really happy with how that turned out. I feel like, oh my goodness, now's not the time. Yeah, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I feel like I feel like I achieved what I set out to do. I set out to show that here's consent, and it doesn't need to be overly complicated. We can actually talk about consent in a literal minute. It's that simple. That government ad that I referenced, I should have pulled the government ad. Why did I fucking do that? I can't do it now because my computer sucks and the stream will crash if I try to open a new tab. So, you should donate. As you can see, we have our daily dono goal to buy me a pizza, but perhaps I'm being a little bit overly ambitious. First we get the pizza and then a computer. If you have some money lying around, in fact, let me grab the Streamlabs dono link. That light's a little bright. Oh well, it's fine. Well, actually, hang on. How do I look? Oh no, it's okay. It's fine. It's not bright. Anyway, let me get rid of Damien's 21st. Copy. Alright. Let me jump back in. Anyway, I should have pulled that dumb ad. So, to start with, absolutely, consent is super sexy. I love consent, seriously. If I legitimately had a woman tell me, hell yeah, then that'd be like, serious. That'd be the easiest nut of my life. The quickest nut. So, like I said, the milkshake ad was actually a government thing. The government thought that they could explain consent through the analogy of a milkshake. Let me bring up that image I used. The whole premise of the ad is that, oh, we're going to talk about consent with milkshakes, and we're going to show... Really? Come on. Are you actually alt-right, or are you apparently alt-right? Come on. If you're not alt-right, then feel free to get comfortable, but otherwise... Anyway, the bar is very low. Is it? I don't know. Depends on who you speak to. Well, you know, what's your opinion on the Jews? That's a pretty easy temperature check. Anyway, I've derailed this conversation enough. Indifferent. Okay, well, good. That's a pretty good barometer. So, the government thought that it could explain consent through the analogy of milkshakes. The whole premise of this ad is that this couple is enjoying a milkshake, and the woman in the ad helps herself to the milkshake, and not only helps herself to the guy's milkshake, but as you can see in this image... Hey, you know who the real problem is? The real problem is with Italians. No one talks about them. Apparently we can't be racist to Italians anymore. What's the world coming to? So not only does she help herself to his milkshake in the video, as we can see here, she gets a little bit in his face with it. The idea behind their ad was that, you know, look how, you know, you're getting into someone's space, you're messing with their stuff without, you know, their permission. You're helping themselves to their milkshake. You're not only helping yourself to their milkshake, but you're, you know, going beyond what's socially acceptable with it. Well, I mean, the Italians did flip. I mean, in both wars they flipped, so we know who not to trust in a war. Now, I don't know if milkshakes, like, I don't know if you could actually use milkshakes as a good analogy for consent. But the whole point with my video was that you don't need an analogy. This is what I'm talking about when I say that the conversation around consent gets overly complicated. You can explain it in literally 60 seconds. And that's what I did. This milkshake ad went on for like 5 minutes. It was crazy. And it really didn't get the point across. The whole point about consent, about respecting people's spaces, and about, you know, respecting their personal space, respecting their consent, it didn't get that message across. And it just was confusing, really. Not only confusing, but it was kind of insulting to the whole conversation around consent. Hey, what's up, Anarcho Taco? I might watch it again, since we've got people coming in now. Let me see. Anarcho Taco, we're talking about a video that I dropped last night, which I'm going to watch it again, because it's only a minute and a half long, and the whole point of the video was that I'm frustrated by conversations around consent. So, to show that the conversation of consent is needlessly complicated, I made a video titled Consent in 60 Seconds, to show that you don't need a 5-minute long milkshake analogy, which cost however many thousands of taxpayer dollars. You can explain consent in literally 60 seconds. Oh, actually, a fungus, how you doing? We're talking consent. So, okay, now that we have more people coming in, Let's take a look. This is a video that I dropped last night, titled Consent in 60 Seconds, and it's going to show how you can talk about consent in 60 literal seconds. I haven't changed my Twitch name to Spastic Priest just yet. True, non-consensually sharing a milkshake with a Nazi does sound fun. Anyway, let's learn. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the hottest, dirtiest, sexiest thing around. Consent. Unlike the Australian government, I'm not going to insult your intelligence with an ad that compares consent to milkshakes. No, I want to show you that the concept is so simple that it can be explained in 60 seconds. Starting now. Consent is all about making sure that everyone involved is comfortable and having a good time. Understand that while you may be comfortable with one thing, someone else may not. Don't think of consent as something to be achieved. Consent is negotiated. How do we talk consent? Well, the most important thing is to be receptive. How are they acting? Do they seem happy? Do they seem enthusiastic? Are they returning your touch in a good way? Are they making a noise in a bad way? If you're ever unsure, just ask. You okay? People are complicated, so socializing can be tricky. If you're not so good on picking up on social cues, then don't escalate further than they have. If they've touched your arm, touch their arm. If they've touched your leg, touch their leg. But if they've only touched your arm, do not touch their leg. And if all else fails, be honest. Would you like to come back to my place and play some video? And nothing else. It's better to come off as awkward than a creep. Clothing is not consent, flirting is not consent, no means no, no that changes to yes is still no, and a coerced yes is definitely a no. Because if it's not a hell yeah, it's a hell no. Alright. I don't know how to say it. I'm just going to call you Shibaz. Shibaz, I guess I am sawing over my own video. Anyway, so yeah, absolutely, consent is really hot. Consent, like, the thumbnail, wait, let me show you the thumbnail of this video. It's true. There's nothing sexier than consent. So, alt-right, I mean, like, when it comes, in terms of, as long as the other person consents, there's no problem. If your comfort comes at the expense of another, as long as they consent, as long as, you know, like, I take the libertarian perspective, anything that's done between consenting adults is their business, you know. If you want to engage in something which, you know, does affect the comfort of another person, as long as they consent, then no problem. And you're right, Anako Taco, consent, like, that's why I say that, at the start of the video, like, consent isn't, like, it's not something you, like, work towards, and it's not like a mission. It's not a video game where you're like, yes, I got it, I got consent. I got this thought from Joe the Silly Serious, which is an Australian streamer, and she was talking about consent a while back, and she was talking about how consent is too often seen as something that, like, guys set out to work to achieve. Like, they work and they have to, like, okay, yes, I got it, I've got consent, alright, we can go ahead. The conversation around consent is a continuous one. You know, you have to be aware that, you know, it might change. People might. I only had 60 seconds, so I had a little bit more I wanted to say. If someone might be okay with going so far, but stopping there, and they don't want to proceed any further. Okay, actually, in a fungus, in a non-parasocial way. This all sounds fairly straightforward. Who really argues against it? I should have pulled it. But a lot of people on the right really struggle with consent. There's this Rush Limbaugh. I should have pulled it. Damn it. This Rush Limbaugh bit that he talked about on radio one time, where you can hear his anger in his voice. He's fuming over the idea of consent. He talks about how he's saying like, oh, the left think that anything goes, that adults can do anything between them as long as they have one thing, consent. And he's right. The left does think that you can do anything. I don't have a problem. Like, what alt-right said earlier, if two consenting adults or more want to engage in something where the comfort of one or more of the people involved will be affected, where one person's satisfaction comes at the expense of another, as long as everybody involved consents, that's none of my business. What business is it of mine what consenting adults do in the privacy of their own home? So, this is the cannot rape your wife argument. As in, like... Wait, are you saying, like, right, the conservative, like, yeah. Exactly. And you see constantly where people on the right invade people's bodily autonomy. You just said something that contradicts itself. Which bit? Because my position is two consenting adults, go ahead. Anyway, in terms of who struggles with consent, we can look at examples of the right struggling with consent a lot. I covered it a while back, but some of you may have seen that four-way panel on Eliza Schaefer's YouTube channel, Slightly Offensive, where it was a four-way right-wing panel between John Doyle, Lauren Witzke, Blair White, and Karolyn Poroshenko. And at one point, John Doyle straight up said that the idea of having privacy in your own home is a myth. The idea that you have the right to individual liberty where, as long as that's none of my business, you go ahead. He was saying how that's just not a thing. The justification for this was that any action or lifestyle that he perceives to be wrong shouldn't be tolerated as, well, you're just doing that, in your own space. This is a violation of someone's consent. Consent doesn't have to be about anything of a sexual nature. Consent also relates to just making sure that people, basically live and let live. As long as everyone consents, it's all cool. But the very question suggests that it isn't possible. What? Well, hang on. Well, then that's not consent. Like, because some people engage in, like, something that we, might not perceive to be consensual. Like, if two adults want to engage in, pain play, where, as you said, someone's comfort is coming at, it's the expense. If that's, what somebody wants to engage in, as long as that's consensual, that's fine. There's also non-consensual play where people play. Not quotes, but this is a kink. People will play with non-consensual consensual sex. The whole point is that it's playing around the idea of being non-consensual. But at the end of the day, it's all pretend. Everybody still legitimately consents. If they don't consent, well then that's not consent. Drug and gun laws are immoral. For instance, that's another, violation of someone's consent. A drug is, I consent to taking the drugs. The producer, makes sure that they are produced in a, healthy and sterile environment. But the government says no. That's a violation of my consent. It's like I say, consent doesn't just have to be around sex. It can be about all sorts of things. And actually, Fungus is right. Another, when considering consent, just because you've... if you leave the next morning and you're like, fuck me, that was a really shit lay. That doesn't mean that you didn't give consent. Like, you can walk away having a bad experience and still have given consent. But what's important is that if you do walk away having a bad experience, then let it be for a reason other than that you did not give consent. Maybe they're shit at kissing, or they're really bad at going down. Let it be for that reason. Don't let it be because you didn't give consent. Liberals get mad when we take away their voting rights, but with their votes they try to take out guns. Well, Ghost is anonymous. That's a problem with liberals, alright? But hey, this isn't a liberal stream, this is a leftist stream. And let me tell you, mate, leftists love guns. I don't want to take your guns away. I want to, to protect them and promote gun safety and gun responsibility. Well, actually, Fungus, I think that's what alt-right was referencing. I don't know, like, alt-right, were you talking about non-consensual, consensual play? Because, like, the name sounds funny, but it's still consensual sex. It's just, like, it's role-play. It's role-playing non-consensual sex, but at the end of the day, it's still adults that consent. So, when addressing your question, I don't care how much discomfort a party member receives in a sexual act, as long as they've consented. Whatever it may be. As long as they consent, then there's no problem. Which is something that, the right really struggles with. Like, I remember a few years back, the UK was trying to ban BDSM porn and the like, when really, it's not any business of yours if that's what gets somebody off, and as long as it's involved between consenting adults, it's none of your business. So going back towards, are you... Yes, Ghost, I am Australian, but like, oh my god. British? That's not funny, mate. Although related to that, this is a bit of like this is a complete like tangent, but like hot take it. We need to stop being anti-British because here's the thing. Hear me out. It's not the British who suck. It's the English. The English are the nasty fuckers. The Irish are cool as fuck. Hell yeah, like, the only good English soldier is a terms of service soldier. So, they're cool. Scotland, they're okay. It's the English who we should be focusing our hate against. Do Aussies and British have beef? No, that's the problem. The Aussies fucking love the British. And it disgusts me because, I hate monarchies, and yet Australia is still part of the Commonwealth. Australia is not a republic. Australia is a constitutional monarchy, which is pretty gross. I'm a big fan of democracy, and a monarchy is fairly anti-democratic. I don't care how much people want to go on about, oh, it's only symbolic. Well, if it's only symbolic, then you should have no problem getting rid of it. If it serves no utility, then... yeah, like, I mean, Aussies are bootlickers for the British. Support for a republic is at an all-time low, so fucking bootlickers. Anyway, let's get back to consent. So, let me bring up the script. So anyway, consent to... let's see. So, yeah, as we were talking about earlier, consent is something to be negotiated. It's not something to be achieved. It's not like an objective that you need to complete. Consent is going to, like, change and be malleable. People are going to be comfortable just going so far, and then, maybe stopping and going not so far. When I talk about, being receptive, for me, that's the biggest tell for consent. A little bit later, which I'll get to in a moment, I try to make consent I try, like, the way I described it, be in a way so that people who maybe aren't so good with social skills could understand it as well. Because for me, like, I'm very neurotypical, so I'm very receptive when it comes to how people are acting in a social environment. So for me, because consent is so often not as simple as like, yes, I consent. You know, you have to be picking up on how people are acting. So that's why I talk about, do they seem happy? Do they seem enthusiastic? How are they, like, with their body? Are they comfortable with you getting in their personal space? Are you comfortable? Are they comfortable being closer? How are they? How are they acting? That's what you need to pick up. That's what you need to pick up on. Are they comfortable sitting across from you, or are they more comfortable sitting next to you? These little things is how we work around consent. Consent is like tea. Well, Sam HDMI, we've watched it twice now on stream. If more people keep coming in, then we might have to watch it again. But last night I dropped a video on my... sorry, I didn't realize that would be playing. I dropped a video on my YouTube channel about consent in 60 seconds. I have seen that consent is like tea, but the whole point is that stop talking about consent in an analogy. Just talk about consent. It's that simple. It's like... the conversation around consent is so needlessly complicated. Just talk consent. That's it. That's all there is to it. As we see here, the Australian government put out a 5-minute long ad about consent, where they use the analogy of milkshakes. Now, I have seen the consent is like tea video, and, like, it's okay, but we don't need an analogy to talk consent. Just talk about consent. It's that simple. Also, Ghost, I'm glad that you say that I'm a real Aussie. Thank you. Real Aussies do want an independent Australia, so thank you for that. The consent is like tea ad is good, though. I don't know, it's kind of funny, though, because, like, I get, like, when I watched it, I was more caught up with the video than its content. Like, the one part when it's like, and if they're unconscious, don't pour tea in their mouth. Like, I'm too busy laughing at the idea of pouring tea in somebody's unconscious mouth than I am to think about consent. Just talk about consent, that's all there is to it. Anywho, let's see. Oh, we'll say, if you're ever unsure, just ask. You okay? Despite, like I said, I have really good at social skills. I'll still just ask people, if I'm, and this is like before we're even like getting to sex, if I'm just on a date with someone, just ask them, if they're comfortable. And you don't need to be like, oh, are you comfortable with this? Just very simply, just, you okay? That's it. That's all there is to it. It helps to ease things up. The same thing if I'm getting into it with somebody, especially if it's for the first time, or even just like every time, just every so often ask them, you okay? And if they are, then go ahead. Should we make Ivanka Princess of Earth? All countries have to pay a tax to her. Better that than the Queen. I mean, if they're smart, they'll put Ivanka up as the Republican nominee next term. Because, like, come on, Trump will be way too old by then. Anyway. And then we get to the part where I talk about social cues. Because, I realize that while I might have really good social skills and can pick up whether or not someone's comfortable or not, it's not so easy for other people. A lot of people do struggle with social skills. So for people in that situation, how do they go about understanding if someone's consenting or not? So I talk about how if you're not so sure, then he's gonna come. Oh dear. Okay, Kamala said, "Do not come." All right, and I haven't come since Kamala gave that speech. So like, They better open up the border quick so I can come. I talk about don't escalate further than another person's done. So if you're on a date with someone, and I'll even use, like, despite, being very well socially adjusted, good social skills, I'll still use this rule when I'm out on a date with somebody for the first time, and usually the first, like, several times, because, I very rarely sleep with somebody on the first date. So the rule of don't escalate further than what they have. So I say in the video, if they've touched your arm, touch their arm. If they've touched your leg, touch their leg. I use that as like a rule of thumb. I'll wait until somebody has invaded my... Well, not invaded, but I'll wait until somebody has got close with my personal space before getting in their personal space. And I won't take it further than what they've already done. So like I say in the video, if, I'm on a date with someone and we have a laugh and, like they, like, touch me on the arm, I might do the same thing. Not like then. It's not like we're mirroring each other, but just in the flow of conversation. Same thing if, like we have a laugh and, like she, like we laugh and like she, like, slaps my leg or something. That for me is like, okay, like, that's what they're comfortable with. So at some stage, that, I might do that as well. I also say, if they've only touched your arm, do not touch their leg. So that's the idea of don't push them further than what they've pushed you. Don't take it any further than what they've displayed that they're comfortable with. So somebody might, touch your shoulder on something, and that's what they're comfortable with, but they might not be comfortable with you touching their leg. So I use that as a rule of thumb. Like, okay, they're comfortable with touching my shoulder, so I'm going to assume that's what they're comfortable with in terms of me reciprocating. That would be pretty weird if somebody touched my butt and then they were like, whoa, what are you doing? If I tried to touch theirs. And also, this next bit is important because in the conversations that I've seen happening around consent recently, people have talked about how, I won't name names, but going back to somebody's place is like an unspoken rule. That you go over to someone's place, you're going to bang. I especially dislike this idea because, like, I would just like to have a girl over for... Like, if I invite a girl over to my place and be like, oh, hey, like, come over for some movies and I'll make some fried chicken or something. Like, I don't want her to hear that and think, like, oh, he wants to bone. No, like, I just legitimately want you to come over so we can watch a movie because I like movies and I like fried chicken. And I like doing that with company. And not only that, but it's like a really nasty precedent to have the idea of, oh, going back to someone's house means sex. So that's why I talk about in the video, make it clear what your intentions are. Don't let it be this unspoken rule. Would you like to come back to my place and play some video games and nothing else? If you want nothing else, just say it. Straight up say it. Don't let it, like, hang in the air like, oh, come back to my place and play some video games. Come back to my place for a coffee. Normalize cuddling as friends. I would love to normalize cuddling as friends. And normalize cuddling as friends between men especially. Keen mustache? Well, thank you, new socialist. I grew it myself. So, related to this idea of be explicit, well, not explicit, but, like, be honest. If you're talking about inviting somebody back to your place, if it's, just legitimately come back to my place and play some video games, actually tell them, and nothing else. And as I say in the video, it's better to come off as awkward than a creep. Because if you say, like, I'll come back to my place and nothing else, like, it's a little bit like, oh, haha, like, a little bit quirky, awkward. But, it's like, if you just say, like, oh, would you like to come back to my place and play some video games? Because we have this this unspoken rule that coming back to someone's place means sex. If you don't want, if that's not the message you want to send, well, then they might think like, oh, this is our first date or our second date, and they're, already inviting me back to their place. You might come off as a creep, as a creep. So, it's better to come off as a little awkward and be like, oh, and nothing else. Like, seriously, nothing else. I would rather be perceived as awkward and have a good time and have somebody come back to my place and play some video games or watch a movie than me inviting them back to their place, but not being, really honest about what I want, which is video games, and having them be like, oh, no, I gotta go, sorry. Do people usually help others grow them? I don't know. And then just the last bit, which I had to mention in the video. Clothing is not consent. Flirting is not consent. This is another thing which I saw being talked about in the conversation around consent recently. Talking about how if somebody's dressed a certain way, they're doing it to... they're giving off a message, which is, that's very close to victim blaming in terms of, you're dressing like you are, you're asking for it. The same thing with flirting. Somebody flirting doesn't mean that they're consenting. If someone's acting promiscuous, then that's their business, but that doesn't mean that they've consented. Somebody can act as flirtatious or as slutty as they want, but the minute that they say stop, or no, or get off, that's that. That's it. It doesn't matter how sexual someone is being. If that's not them, that's not the same as consent. Consent by contract with lawyers present is the way. I mean, if only, everybody should carry around a consent contract with them so that, the moment that you start to get in somebody's personal space, you pull it out, sign it, and then you're good to go. Unfortunately, it's not so simple, which is why you need to be working on your social skills to make sure that you understand consent. So yeah, it doesn't matter how somebody is dressed. It doesn't matter how somebody looks. It doesn't matter how somebody acts. That's not the same thing as consent. Are we Ann Kappa? As in, anarcho-capitalist? Because, no, I'm anarcho-syndicalist. Anarcho-capitalism is pretty cringe. Oh, as in, regarding, the contract. Well, I mean, that does sound something that would happen in an ANCAP world. So no means no. Pretty explicit. No that changes to yes is still a no. If somebody says no initially, it probably means that they're not comfortable with that. It probably means that they're not comfortable. So if they change it to yes, it's probably because they felt pressured. If somebody says no initially, that's your cue to stop. It's not your cue to keep pushing them until you get a yes. Oh, I'm glad that there's not many ANCAPs on Twitch, alright? Don't get me started on anarcho-capitalism. And a coerced yes is definitely a no. It should be a no-brainer, but I mean, I made this video about consent, so it should be a no-brainer that a coerced yes is still no, but here we are. And of course, the last line, because if it's not a hell yeah, it's a hell no. Pretty simple. And like I said at the start of this, if a woman, legitimately said, hell yeah to me, if I was like, hey, you want to do the business, if she said, quote unquote, hell yeah, I'd be like, that'd be, legitimate, pogging. So that's consent. And as I have, I hope at this point, made abundantly clear, consent can be covered in 60 seconds. We don't need milkshake analogies. We don't need tea analogies. You can just talk consent. You can just talk about it. You don't need an analogy. And not only... Oh, thank you. New Socialist Era, welcome. You don't need an analogy. You can just simply talk about consent. And in fact, it's so simple. You can do it in 60 seconds. And hey, if you're enjoying the stream so far, it would mean a whole lot if you would subscribe or follow me on Twitch. Jump over to YouTube and follow me there for more prepared content. You can also follow me on Twitter, join the Discord through the link down below. And hey, I believe I fixed the donos, so if you have any extra bucks lying around, don't know what to do with, send it my way. I do love talking about consent, alright? Consent, needs to be talked about more. The problem with consent is that the conversation just gets overly complicated. You don't need a lecture. You don't need a weird analogy, a food analogy. Just talk consent. It's that simple. Alright. I have another topic I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about nationalism, which seems appropriate on the 4th of July. So... Oops. However, I am just going to run to the toilet. So give me 2 minutes and then I'll be back. But I'll leave you with this. There, not even... How's that? Not even 2 minutes. A minute and a half. So, New Socialist Era, thanks for the sub. I'm working on a video that you actually might be interested. It's coming out very soon. It's about Amazon and their anti-union history, so stay tuned for that. Now, or to cap off the last topic, when it comes to consent, just don't be forceful with people. Listen to them, get a feel for how they're acting, and if you feel like somebody's not comfortable, even if you're just unsure, just don't push them. And that is both in a sexual and non-sexual environment. If you're just on a date with someone, then, if you feel like they might not be comfortable with you getting in their personal space, just, sit across the table from them and enjoy the day. Because, as I say at the start, it's just ultimately about making sure that everybody's comfortable and is A-okay with going ahead with what you're doing. And that's all there is to it. Alrighty. So, nationalism. How do we talk about that? Whew. So, when it comes to nationalism, I feel like... oh, actually, you know what? Recently on stream, a while back, I did that quiz from The Guardian, which you all might have seen. to determine how populist you are. And I'll bring up my results. Kind of needless to say, I scored fairly high in populist left. That seems like a bit of a no-brainer. And I was closest to Bernie Sanders, unsurprisingly, at least similar to Donald Trump, again, unsurprisingly. Now, there was two questions in this quiz. One of them was rating my patriotism, and the other was rating my nationalism. And I feel like it's important to distinguish between the two. When it comes to patriotism, I'm very patriotic. When it comes to nationalism, not so much. Nationalism, the two are very often conflated. Being patriotic for your country is the same, is conflated between being nationalistic. The kind of pride that people feel in their country is not really in the country itself. It's more with the people, the culture, the kind of community that they find, and that they feel represents their people and their country. When you're talking about a nation, that's much more specific to the state. It's important also to distinguish between the nation and the state. The difference between a nation and a state is that the nation refers much more to that kind of sense of cultural community. The state is specific borders. Take the US, for instance. The state is the United States of America. However, you could very easily divide up America into several nations that people feel representative of their community. We have New France, down like in Louisiana and Florida area, the Pacific Northwest, the Midwest. These are the kind of communities, the kind of cultural sense, the cultural hotspots that exist within a country. So, going back to patriotism and nationalism, the way that at least I distinguish these two is that patriotism is more being proud of that national community, whereas nationalism seems to be invoked more frequently with reference to the state. I don't see the point of being nationalistic for the sake of nationalism. Just, I should be proud in Australia because it's Australia. I'm much more patriotic in what I would like to believe that Australia stands for. Same thing for Americans. We would like to believe that countries like Australia and America are lands of opportunity where people's rights are protected, where people can enjoy a good life for them and themselves and their children. It doesn't always work out like that in practice. Now, I want to talk about nationalism because too frequently I feel like it's dismissed by people on the left. People on the left feel this same kind of apprehension I do about nationalism, because we can look at how nationalism has been invoked in the past. I can't remember the name, but there's a historian that I read recently. Can't remember his damn name, but he was talking about how fascism is nationalism taken to the extreme, which I would agree with. Like, definitely one characteristic of fascism is that it's ultra-nationalistic, which is, the danger into when you worship the state for the state's sake, when it's reverence for the state rather than what it's supposed to represent. What it's supposed to represent the people in terms of all of that culture there, and more so the institute, which democracy and the rule of law and whatnot. Worshipping the state for the state's sake. However, when it comes to mobilizing people in a populist movement, if I was to have a conversation with the people on the right, excuse me, about making Australia better, God, excuse me, sorry, I could very easily do it through a nationalistic lens. If anything, the left shouldn't be abandoning nationalism. The left should be doing it, should be invoking it in a way that can be, utilized effectively without that danger of falling into a more nationalistic, for nationalism's sake, mindset. So let me break it down a little bit. So, like I said, if I was to talk to a person on the right about, say, workers' rights, I would do so in terms of talking about how, look at Australian production. Look how Australian production has been taken from this country. Look at how Australia doesn't produce anything anymore. Australia used to be known for things like producing Australian muscle cars. And where are they now? Well, they're overseas. And look at, instead, who we rely on for our industry. Look at how foreign companies and foreign governments meddle in our own economy. Look at how they meddle in our government. Look at how, look at the influence that they have. They own the companies, they make all the money, and yet, what does Australia get out of it? I mean, sure, we buy their goods and such, we get cheap goods, but really, Australia loses out in the bulk share of the money, and we, at the same time, by propping up these corporations, we serve to... we're complicit in the influence that they exert over our government. So, this is a bit of a dangerous idea, though, because I feel like it's very easily to take this conversation and have it slip into a protectionist or even an isolationist kind of mindset. Because, I mean, that's when nationalism is invoked on the right, 9 times out of 10, it's in an isolationist way. However, I feel like nationalism serves utility on the left in terms of invoking these ideas about what people believe to represent their country. We're doing that, but also doing it in a way that sets up, gives people an enemy, but doing it in the focus, or in the way that allows people to be proud of their country. Because let's be honest, let's be real about this. The Chinese government exerts a great deal of power over the rest of the world through the corporations that exist in China. Ultimately, the Chinese Communist Party has power over corporations in China, and because it has that much influence in the global market, it's able to exert political power through that. So, I mean, like, everyone on the right doesn't like China. They don't like the fact that there is this influence on their governments. Well, I say, as the left, let's use that. Let's use this distaste that people have. Let's use this anger over that influence and channel this anger into, like, hey, the only way that we're going to remove this foreign influence is if we protect our workers. So, for instance, we need strong unions. We need to make sure that the average American or the average Australian can collectivize to protect themselves. Because against a billion-dollar corporation, what can one person do? The only thing we have is our collective bargaining. This is the kind of lens that I mean, that we can broach these ideas to people on the right to get them to understand, like, you don't like this corporation, I don't either. Now, you might not have the right reason for disliking it, but ultimately we have the same goal of making sure that both of our lives are as comfortable as we can, and just, benefiting everyone. Because, making your country economically strengthening your company helps both the right and the left. Because people on the right aren't interested in workers' rights for, the sake of workers' rights. Like, I would never talk to... If I was going to talk about alienation among workers, it would not be... Like, I wouldn't just talk about it in a purely alienation sense. I wouldn't just talk to somebody on the right about, like, how, like, the nature of work, isolates us from each other and isolates us from the product, and removes, like, the human element. It strips us down to just a cog in a machine. I don't know how well that would go over with people. But what people on the right do understand is being proud for their country. And people on the right don't like foreign interference with their government or their country. So, let's use it. Let's use that dissatisfaction that people have and radicalize them into more pro-worker ideas. But, it's a fine line, so you have to ride that line, into, like, ride the line of populism, so make it clear that, these are rights for all Australians, all people that want to come to this country. These are rights for everyone. It's not about isolating ourselves from other people. It's about, serving your country in a way that benefits everyone. And I mean everyone, every Australian, regardless of, where they come from or how they look. If they want to come to this country, cool, let's welcome them in. But let's make sure that everybody who does come to this country is protected. Yeah. Leftists sell nationalism. They sell it short when it's really a tool that could very easily be used. It can be invoked in the same way that Trump invoked nationalism during the 2016 election. All it needs is the right kind of direction. It just needs the right kind of guidance. People have these feelings, but if you can direct it in the right way, then it can be utilized properly. Don't point the finger at Mexicans. Like, point the finger at the people that really are hurting your economy or hurting the world, hurting democracy. Point them at, hey, look at how much influence Amazon exerts over our government. Look at how much influence the Chinese Communist Party exerts over our government. Take this emotion that people very clearly have and point it in the right direction. Because otherwise, somebody like Trump will come along and tell them that it's Muslims or Mexicans or Antifa. If the left wants to appeal to people on the right, then, throw their own rhetoric back at them. I know that in Australia, certainly, it'd be very easy to talk to people about this, because Australia has, like, less of a IT-based economy than America. Much less. So it'd be very easy to appeal to Australians with the idea of, hey, we need to, look at how Australia has no production anymore. We're relying so much on foreign corporations. Let's bring industry back to Australia, and, let's let's turn it into a worker co-op to make sure that Australians are the ones calling the shots. Easy. That's nationalism done right. Which is, it's different to patriotism. If patriotism is more talking about that, cultural flavor, then this is a way to utilize nationalism in a sense that can be effectively used so that people are getting the right kind of ideas across and aren't just being nationalistic for nationalism's sake. If you want to invoke nationalism, we'll do it in a way that directs people against the real enemy of your country. Because, the enemy is not Mexicans. The enemy is people that actually are causing problems in your country. Like the Chinese Communist Party has a huge influence over Australian politics. And I wouldn't have a problem with a giant powerful country influencing Australian politics if that country was a bastion of liberal democracy. China's a fascist state, and everyone on the right and left should have a problem with that. If it was, even if it was a country like America, I wouldn't mind it so much. But the fact that China is what it is, that's my problem. And this could very easily convince people on the right. And actually, Fungus is 100% right. Open border policy is best policy. So tying it back to the 4th of July, don't just be nationalistic for nationalism's sake. All right. Ugh. That was about all I had to talk about for today. What's the time? 8:42. I don't know. Yeah. I just think that it's a tool that the left should use, really. It works. We can see how it mobilizes people. Let's use it for good. If you put me up on stage talking in front of a crowd of right-wingers, it'd be so easy to turn them on to worker co-ops. So easy. I just talk about how we need to protect the Australian worker and that we can't rely on the government. We can't rely on business. We can only rely on ourselves. But I'd make it clear that anyone that wants to come to this country, anyone who wants to call Australia home, they're just as Australian as we are. We need to protect them as well. So easy. So easy. So with leftists talk about, how they, hate America. Or hate Australia. I don't hate Australia, but I hate aspects of it. I hate its institutions. But the country itself, I don't. It's like it needlessly alienates people. Really. So yeah, I don't know. I didn't have anything else to talk about. So I don't know. I might call it there. Anyway, thank you all for coming. If you enjoyed the stream, then it would mean a lot if you'd chuck me a follow. Head over to YouTube and subscribe to me there. Jump over to Twitch, follow me there. Join the Discord through the link down below. And if you have any extra dollars lying around, then I do have a link to Streamlabs. Other than that, everybody, please join your union. And I love you all. Have a good one.